All right, all right. We will get cooking here momentarily, I promise. All right, who we got coming in so far? We got Garth and Jimmy and Joel and Lynn. Welcome, welcome, welcome. All right, so while we're waiting for everybody, why don't you pop in, tell us where you're from. We'll see who's the farthest away. Let us know where you're coming from. I know I'm in Maryland, so I can pop. I'm in Woodstock, Maryland. If anybody else is from around here, I know we got some folks from HHS, either from it could be multiple places for HHS. CMS is not too far from Phoenix, Arizona. That's got it so far. Daytona Beach, Arlington, Virginia, Washington, DC. Joel, awesome. And Lynn's from Arlington. So where are you from? So far, we have Prescott, Arizona as being the farthest. Garth is from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. One of my buddy's brothers threw out the first pitch in the Phillies game yesterday. I thought that was pretty cool. San Francisco's got it. Curtis from San Francisco. We'll get cooking in just a minute. Let folks kind of land in here. Appreciate you guys joining us. We'll get cooking. Let us know where you're from. And it's okay. We'll have the transcript going on. It's pretty cool, right? He said that somebody just asked him. So Harold from Inverness, that's in Illinois? Is that right, Harold? Orlando, Florida. Jimmy, getting warm there, I imagine, Jimmy. All right, everybody, stay away from your speakers because I'm recovering from a cold. Just don't want you to don't get too close. But yeah, I'm in Woodstock, Maryland. Where are you out of, Matt?
I am out of Baltimore, Maryland.
Baltimore, Maryland. How about you, JoJo? Where are you from?
Central Illinois.
Central Illinois.
Outside the city of Decatur.
Decatur. Fantastic. All right, well, we'll get cooking in about 30 seconds. So just let us know where you're coming from. Farthest away we got so far is San Francisco. I do believe Curtis has it. So there we go. So we do want to welcome everybody today. We have a whole bunch of people interested in this. A lot of questions. I know cybersecurity is just about solved, right, Joe? There's not a whole lot going on anymore. So we do appreciate all the agencies that have decided to sign up today. Quick disclaimer, it's not endorsed by GSA. These guys happen to be GSA folks. Informational purposes only. Man, one of these days I'm going to fix that. And all participation is voluntary, and government personnel is not endorsement to purchase from any vendor, and this session is being recorded. So we have some of these that came in. If you'd like to include you in what you would like to see in this best briefing ever, the information from Lynn, the information provided helps me manage risk. Hey, that's probably a good thing, right? Right, Joe?
Yep, we got that. We'll cover that.
We'll cover that one. Margot from Treasury, it can identify how to prioritize actionable plans to reduce risk, to reduce and mitigate risk. Very similar to Lynn. That's awesome from Margot. Yep. And Michael from FAA, discuss ongoing supply chain issues affecting the U.S. Just a couple things that might cross over into that. What do you think, Joe?
We'll touch on it.
How about this one?
On supply chain. No.
Amber says the briefer wears a funny wig. What do you got? What do you got? You got anything? I'll tell you what we'll do, Amber. Instead, I got my Uncle Sam hat. Does that help? I can wear my Uncle Sam hat, at least for this part. From Jamar from HHS, I learned something new. Anything new, Jamar says. So we're going to make sure you get something out of it. All right. So Perellis, it starts on time, message is clear, and ends on time. Let's do our best. How about that, Joe?
We will give it a grand effort.
Yeah. William from the VA addresses potential threat techniques of hacking systems using ChatGPT 4.0 and what countermeasures we have. I like that. Very cool. Anybody else have anything else you want to do? That's the end of the Uncle Sam hat. I'm sorry, Amber, you don't get the best briefing ever because Joe's not willing to put on a wig. So I'm sorry about that. So we do have a please address the President's National Security Memorandum on critical infrastructure, security, and resilience. As a matter of fact, that's what we're going to be talking about, right, Joe?
Yes.
And is the government using LLM AI, such as ChatGPT 4.0, is a component of intrusion and data. I don't know what that word is. Exfiltration countermeasures, and how so? I don't. Do you know anything about that,
I'm
Joe?
not going to comment on that, although I do know it's under study within our federal government agencies, but I don't know if anybody's using any yet.
All right. Were there any credible threats, or is this just being proactive?
You will find out
Absolutely.
Uh,
today.
how does the federal government plan on making all federal agencies adhere to the EO 13636 and 13800, etc.?
All right, just for the grins of it, 13636 goes back to the year 2013, and 13800 goes back to 2017. Those are continuing executive orders upgrading directives for improving our critical infrastructures for cybersecurity, et cetera. It's a continuation. NSM-22 is a follow-through, asking for a standard approach to risk assessments to prioritize mitigation programs and where you, as agencies, apply your budgets.
So,
But I will not be speaking specifically to either of those executive orders.
okay. Um, how is critical infrastructure reviewed for resilience?
You will find out today.
We will find out. That's what Joe says. Appreciate that. I'll give you an introduction to Joe here as well as Divine. They're the ones that are the host of this event. We're going to talk about what NSM-22 is, what critical infrastructure sectors are, what do we know, and can we make it through, Joe? Can we get through this?
I hope so.
I hope so too. And we're all
I'm
trained
depending
risk
on
managers.
everyone to do that. Okay.
That's right, because we do want to follow this one, which is we're all trained risk managers. We should be. Would you agree? And models for assessing risk and assessing risk impacts, and it's really all about the internet and your data. We'll have additional things popping in here as we go. We'll pop these, but right now, here's the presentation. You can download the presentation, and we'll get the rest of these popped in for the session docs. You will receive those in a little bit. All right. So tell us a little bit about Divine, Matthew Sweet.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. We know you're very busy, and just let you know it really is appreciated. So, Divine Integration, we are an SBA approved 8A IT professional services company. We've been in business since 2003, so we're no fly by night. We specialize in Salesforce and other low-code, no-code solutions such as MuleSoft and ServiceNow. We also do Microsoft custom development, cloud solutions, cybersecurity, mostly in the governance and policy fields, and enterprise service development or delivery, focusing on architecture and IT roadmaps to help your organization get to where it needs to be. So our major goal at Divine is to positively impact lives one interaction at a time. And we do so by providing excellent service with grace to our customers. And again, thank you for your time. If you need anything, let me know.
Fantastic. Appreciate you, Matt.
Thank you.
And our guest speaker today is Joe Norton. You can look all down the right-hand side. I can't talk about all that. We'll never get through here, Joe, if I give all of your accolades and everything that you've done. Just know that Joe has been involved as a special advisor and risk and cybersecurity in multiple aspects, right? You've been doing this across the board.
There's a
Not
reason
just
why
in the
I'm
US
gray-haired
either.
and bald.
What's that?
There's a reason why I'm gray-haired and bald
and you've done this not just in the US, but other places too, right?
throughout Europe.
Throughout Europe as well. So I'll let everybody else read the accolades. We love the participation. If you would like to be involved, we do want the dialogue. We'd love to have you participate. You can raise your hand and you can pop it in the Q&A. And if you have anything that you'd like to do, you can do the chat, you can do the questions and the Q&A and raising your hand. If you have something that you don't want everybody else and their mother to see, shoot that to Matt Sweet at divine.com or give him a shout. And we're going to get at it. I cannot wait to hear what you're all about today. And so do you believe that the government agencies are cyber secure? Let's see what we got here, Joe. yes, no, or you don't know. Okay. And you're going to tell us the right answer to this, or is that right, Joe?
Me, I have no idea. I'm going to give everyone the tools to try and help figure it out.
All right, I'll tell you that. All right, Joe. So while they're filling this in, how do we start this conversation? And this happens to be a picture of yours. So for those of you who did not know Joe is a photographer and just wanted to learn something, I remember there's a couple people that just want to learn anything. This is the best briefing ever for you because Joe is, I mean, this is one of the most incredible shots I've ever seen. And you took this picture?
Of course I did.
That is awesome.
Yeah, this one was up in Alaska. Anyway, and as a sideline, when I have nothing better to do, I'm an avid wildlife photographer. Raptors, big things that chase other things to eat, etc. So how do you start a conversation about critical infrastructure, security, resilience, and national risk management? And well, it's sort of like dropping out of the sky and looking every which way, and where do we go? Where do we turn first, etc.
So let me, I'm going to pop this in here, but I'm going to let you see this poll as well. You ready?
Go
So
ahead.
67% say no, 17% say yes, and 17% don't know. There you go.
Oh no. Oh no.
Oh no,
Oh no, we have work to do.
we do. All right,
Um,
there you go.
So a lead into NSM-22 is I just thought I'd just throw up on the screen at least that there's a number of factors that go into lead to NSM-22, right? So just for background, in the update to the National Intelligence Strategy, goal number 6, in this increasingly complex environment, risk is assumed by one is effectively assumed by all. So whatever risk, cybersecurity risk we have in any one area of our government, our agencies, our military, or in our other critical infrastructure sectors, which we'll look at, it's not isolated to one particular place, okay? And resilience also includes defending the nation's economic security and prosperity. And as an intelligence strategy, it's about ensuring that everyone in the intelligence community is providing us the information and the continued ability to accomplish what your mission may be and sustain a focus on our most important long-term threats in the face of the inevitable. Now, when we think about risk across the board, it's not just cybersecurity, it's health and safety and pandemics and cybersecurity and climate and terrorist attacks, etc. So specifically, recently released is the National Security Memorandum on Critical Infrastructure Security and Resilience.
All right.
And our critical infrastructure comprises the physical and virtual assets and all systems vital to our nation and our capacity to be disrupted, incapacitate, disrupt, debilitate, impact national security, economic security, public health and safety. Your systems are diverse and complex. This is direct from the memorandum. The United States is in the midst of a generational investment in national infrastructure. Now, specific to the question that was raised earlier about how does our federal government help you address executive orders going back to 2013 for critical infrastructure modernization, et cetera, it's through funding and prioritization. And where do you put that? And the follow through with NSM-22 today in the face of so many risks that we face around the world coming at us every day is about understanding those risks, not just to your agencies or your cybersecurity, but also in our civilian sectors, our critical infrastructure for the health and well-being of our nation, okay? Modernization efforts will ensure critical infrastructure provides strong and innovation economy, protects American families, enhances our collective resilience to disasters before they happen, and creates and sustains a resilient nation. Now that sounds a little pompous. Even to me, it sounds a little pompous, but stay with me a little bit. What's next? We also face an era of strategic competition with nation-state actors who target American critical infrastructure and tolerate or enable malicious actions conducted by non-state actors. Now, I'm not going to read this whole paragraph out of SM-22. It's in the deck. You will receive this. But I thought it was important to highlight that we do face critical risks as a nation in places that sometimes we don't think about. Next. The goal is to advance our united effort of strengthening and maintaining secure, functioning, resilient critical infrastructure. It's repetitive, right? We want to really hammer this out. The policies and principles behind NSM-22 are, if I may highlight, risk-based approach. Now, today I address a risk-based approach, not every one of the policy statements, but just the risk-based approach. And the objective of a risk-based approach is identifying and prioritizing critical infrastructure security risks wherever they may lie. Now, I'm going to put, obviously, today a strong emphasis on cybersecurity, but we're talking about all risks that we face. And I'm going to make a very bold statement right now. No matter where the risk comes from, state actors, non-state actors, hacktivists, criminals, espionage, corporate espionage, climate change, whatever it may be, all risks today are cyber risks. All risks today are cyber risks because all of our businesses, our lives, our operations, our deliverable items to our clients, whether they be the citizens of the United States or other clients, are all delivered through information systems. Next. So the policy statement is risk-based approach, advancing blah, 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 prioritization national efforts based on risk assessments, which must consider all threats, hazards, likelihoods, vulnerabilities, and consequences. Okay, keep that in mind. Next. Identify and prioritize security and resiliency based on risk and implement a coordinated national approach. This is a little boring, I get it, but I wanted to put it up here on the screen before we get to the meat of it. And for the purposes of risk, it's the potential for unwanted outcomes. Risk refers to the potential of unwanted outcomes as determined by likelihood and consequences. Now, I'm going to put a slide up shortly about that we're all risk managers, and it's going to seem like, what? I'm a risk manager? Likelihood of unwanted outcome and the potential consequences. Next. So the approach for identifying nationally significant risk, no matter what the risk is, whether you've been in commercial business before, government agencies, military, whatever, the methodology is very simple. Identify, assess, prioritize, mitigate, and monitor. Identify what are your risks, assess them for unwanted outcomes, prioritize what will you do with them, which are the highest, which are the lowest, which ones could you ignore because they're low probability, et cetera. Mitigate, build risk plans, fund your investments, change things, and monitor to make sure that they're not happening to you when you don't want them to. That may have a debilitating impact on our national security. Okay. Most important in NSM-22 and taking a national risk management approach today to critical infrastructure is understanding systemic and cross-sector risk. I mentioned earlier that you're not standing alone. Whether you're an individual employee of an agency, or you're a manager or a director, or you're a senior executive leader, when you look at risk, it's not just risk to you or your business segment or your agency. We're so intertwined in all of our critical information systems today that risk that occurs in one place or a risk event that impacts you has the potential to cascade and impact everyone else around you. It's recognizing that our critical infrastructure has grown increasingly independent and interconnected due to modern economy, including digitization and electrification. Now, that's an old language term, electrification, but it means that we're all connected. And as such, risk to individual sectors can quickly cascade and require coordination and action to understand and mitigate that risk. So how do we get there?
Oops, sorry. You want to ask that poll?
Go to the poll.
All right, let's do it. We're going to the poll. We're going to the poll. Are you engaged with your agency's cybersecurity risk management and mitigation plan? Yes? No? I don't know who runs this thing, or we actually have a plan? And no, we're not going to let anybody know. If you pick the button, there you go. I knew somebody had to have the permission to be able to click that.
Okay.
But there's truth to this, right? Right, Joe? Because and your point, I
Well,
love where you're headed with this point. I could see where you're going.
well, oftentimes in my career, I've been in the trenches. I've come up through the ranks. I've been on the commercial side. I've been in the military, industrial, defense side of the business. I've been on commercial businesses. I've been a management consultant to government agencies for probably about 20 to 25% of my career. Risk management programs and assessments go on, and usually you find out that they're in a vacuum and only the top leadership sees it. And yet every one of us, every one of you here today, every one of us, we are on the front lines of security all around our agency. Every day you are engaged in security. Yet you may not have visibility to how your leadership looks at risk inside your business.
All right.
Anyway,
I'm gonna give them another 3, 2, 1. Wallflowers. Last chance. All right, here we go. Check this out. I like this. 67% are engaged, 27% are not. 3% don't know who runs it, and 3% don't know that they even have a plan.
well, that's good.
Love the honesty, though.
Those are good numbers.
Those are not
Okay.
bad.
Those are good numbers. I like those. Let's move on.
All right.
We get past the boring part. So the critical infrastructure sectors and the sector risk management agencies who are the lead. So when we look at the sectors, chemical, commercial facilities, communications, critical manufacturing, dams, defense, industrial base, energy services, financial services, food, agriculture, government services and facilities, health and public welfare, information technology, nuclear reactors, material and waste and transportation systems. Those are the identified critical sectors we're worried about across our nation, and every one of your agencies supports these areas. Not every agency supports some area and some multiple areas, but the Sector Risk Management Agency for the lead of a national risk management approach is listed by sector. DHS, Department of Treasury, Department of Agriculture, GSA, Health and Human Services, etc. That doesn't mean that your agency is off the hook. It just means that DHS has the lead in ensuring that the risk assessment occurs. Okay, let's move on.
And just point out, which somebody mentioned before about the whole idea about supply chain. All that gets baked into that as well, right?
Well, if we back up a slide,
All right.
I'll answer your question. So if you look at chemical, who are all the major chemical processors out there? So it's everything that's involved, not just from, hey, what is the agency that's supporting the chemical sector? Who are the major commercial providers of chemical capabilities for and processing in the United States and all of their supply chain? It cascades all the way through the extended supply chains for everything we do in this nation. I don't care whether it's commercial facilities or communications or critical manufacturing or dams or water supplies, et cetera. Of course, it includes the supply chain and not just the information security supply chain or information system supply chain, but the physical supply chains. Okay.
We did have a report from Stacy saying the list has some backwardness because DOE is responsible for energy, not emergency services. So we're going to fix that. Thank you, Stacy. Moving ahead to a slide that doesn't have.
Keep going. Go next.
All right. So
what do we know? What do we know? Whether you believe it or not, the wolves are already here. And in many cases, the wolves are not only at your perimeter trying to find a way in many cases, they may already be inside your perimeter. Whether we like it or not, that's the state of affairs. Next slide. So let's take a look at what we do know. General Paul Mascone, former head of NSA, at this moment, the United States faces escalating threats posed by China, Russia, Iran, foreign cartels, sophisticated hackers, WMD proliferators, supplies, terrorists, and more. And he goes on in an article that he wrote in February of 2024 to speak about what remains his biggest worry. And as being an information technology professional my entire career and a security professional, what worries me makes ourselves blind to external threats. We make ourselves. There's so much around us and so much noise that often it just becomes background instead of a core focus. Maintaining vigilance. Let's go to the next piece. Christopher A. Wray, FBI director, his Senate testimony in December 2023. I have never seen a time during my decades-long career when so many threats against the United States were elevated as they are now.
Everybody feeling good?
Oh, I'm not here to make you feel good. CSER alert in February 7th, 2024, alert code Alpha 24. I hope every one of you saw this and are acting on it. The U.S. authoring agencies, CISA, have confirmed that Volt Typhoon has compromised the IT environments of multiple critical infrastructure organizations, primarily in communications, energy, transportation systems, water and wastewater systems, in the continental and non-continental United States.
I had not seen that. Wow.
Keep going. Insidious cyber threat. This is an article, and I use this in many of my talks just to go back to, cyber threats have been around for so long that, again, there's so much noise, it's become like, oh, okay, it's there, it's not my problem. However, Foreign Affairs, Jacqueline Schneider penned an excellent article, which was published in 2021. And it'll be part of your download decks. Cyberspace should be understood as a domain of conflict with key terrain that the United States needs to take and defend. We cannot ignore it. Next. The World Economic Forum Global Risk Report for 2024. Cybersecurity is rated by the World Economic Forum as the 4th highest risk, cybersecurity. And they're hoping within 10 years it'll drop to 8th, but it is the highest risk. So we're including this report in your download package for more detail. The Alliance Risk Barometer of 2024. Now, if you're not familiar with Alliance, it's an insurance company. It's European-based, and it ensures the cybersecurity aspects of a huge swath of commercial businesses around the world, multinational businesses. They rate cybersecurity as the #1 global risk to business. Homeland Threat Assessment. If you want to take a look at how Homeland looks at it, 2024, public safety and security, border and immigration, critical infrastructure, terrorism, illegal drugs, foreign misinformation, disinformation, etc., transnational criminal organizations, disruptive and destructive attacks, espionage against critical infrastructure, the list goes on. We're including this assessment in the download pack. DNI's Director of National Security Annual Threat Assessment, U.S. Intelligence Community, state actors, China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, and conflicts. Oh, by the way, the state actor threats that we face haven't changed in the past 20 years. They're still there, they get worse. Transnational issues, disruptive technology, shared domains, non-state actors, organized crime, human trafficking, etc. Keep going. Department of Defense and climate risk, looking at climate risk for the Department of Defense is about droughts, floods, water supply, critical assets being flooded, agricultural production being reduced, and infrastructure damage. Let's keep going. State-sponsored attacks. The U.S. government disrupts botnet People's Republic of China uses to conceal hacking of critical infrastructure. This was published in February 2024. This is alarming. Hibernating cluster wakes up to map the entire internet, but what could it be planning? Chinese state sponsors are acted again. This was published in April of 2024. Mapping the entire internet. However, is it hard to determine why? Okay. NBC News, Russia brazen intensifying sabotage campaign across Europe, disrupting information systems. This has all been focused at countries that in Europe that are support for Ukraine, conducting sabotage campaigns across Europe. Chinese hackers, you remember these ones, right? Chinese hackers stole emails from the State Department, the Microsoft breach, etc., investigating reports of data theft involving federal tech consulting firms. Change Healthcare. Change Healthcare cyber attack was due to a lack of multi-factor authentication. So says the CEO at its Senate grilling on February 21st. Okay. The CEO says it was lack of multi-factor authentication. Now, many of you who are on the call today were probably impacted by this. Okay. Change Healthcare, which is a small, believe it or not, a small subsidiary of United Healthcare, actually processes 80% of the payments for medical care from doctors' offices, hospitals, pharmacies, etc. And over the past couple of months, if you run into trouble with your insurance because you were denied getting your pharmacy prescriptions fulfilled at say Walgreens or CVS, it was because that Change Healthcare was frozen out. They were ransomware, they were hacked, ransomware, they locked them out completely. And for over 8 weeks, Change Healthcare could not process one transaction. It infected every one of us. They took out billions of dollars, $6 billion worth of bonds to help fund doctors' offices because they were going broke because of this, to keep it going. And the reality was, it was so simple. The hack occurred because of a lack of a password on a server buried in the infrastructure of Change Healthcare. Stunning impacts. Go ahead. Ascension Healthcare, this just occurred on May 10th. Ascension Healthcare is one of the largest hospital chains in the United States. They had to shut down operations in 19 states. 140 hospitals were taken offline by a ransomware attack. Next. Now, some really strange stuff, and I'll just throw this in for grins. Solar storm crashes the GPS system. If you're in the Midwest of the United States, the recent solar storms where everyone else was out there taking pictures of the auroras because we could do it in the middle of the United States, the solar storm disrupted the GPS system. And all of our large-scale and small-scale farmers and all of their tractors use GPS mapping and equipments on their tractors to keep straight furrows and do their planting and get the maximum outputs from their fields for corn and soybean and whatever they may be planting. The solar storm crashed GPS, so nobody could plant. So all of the plantings in the Midwest United States are going to be about 2.5 weeks late. Amazing. Impacts where they come from. Next, Dell confirms hacked 49 million customers. This is May 10th. Keep going. And this is just scratching the surface. And do you remember SolarWinds? Do you remember the MOVEit cyber attacks, et cetera? Let's keep going. All right, I beat it to death. So now my question is, can you survive? This is where we get interesting today. Can your agency survive a significant shutdown? This is not a poll. You don't have to answer. I just want you to think about this. If you were attacked, could you survive a significant shutdown for 1 day of your business operations, for 7 days, for 14 days, for 21 days, for more? Cyber risk is one of the few risks which businesses faces which can have the potential to bring you to a complete standstill. Now, these are questions I ask every one of my clients when they ask me to do a risk assessment. Next. You are all risk managers. Every one of us on the planet, from the day we were born, we are becoming trained risk managers. You may not realize it, but you are. As babies, our parents first protect us from harm. As children, we begin the lifelong process. I'm sure every one of you have heard this before. Look both ways before crossing the street. Don't go anywhere with strangers. Do not stand under or next to trees in a lightning storm. Dress warmly in inclement weather. Just a small sample. These are threats to our individual well-being. Now, one of the surprises that I've had throughout my career is that as soon as wherever I went, all the companies I've served or been a consultant to, I go inside a company, and as soon as we get there, as individuals, we look at each other and say, hey, not my problem. That threat is not my problem. Someone else is going to take care of it. Well, I got news for you. Today's cyber interconnectedness, you're all impacted and you're all risk managers.
And
Practice,
it only takes one of us making a mistake.
one mistake cascades and it flies everywhere today.
Look, just one click in an email and one click in, or just filling information in that you shouldn't fill in, all that stuff. It only takes one.
That's all it does. Anyway, our personal lives is no different from practicing risk. Acknowledge that the risk exists, determine the probability, understand and assess the impact, rank or score, and implement the risk action to mitigate it. It's a very simple methodology. It hasn't changed since Noah built the ark. Next. So the risk world has gone from governance, risk, and compliance models to enterprise risk management to integrated risk management, et cetera. Whatever models that are out there in business or in your agency that use, they all work. They're all pretty similar. Usually what we're seeing in a progression in the risk management profession is bringing in more factors to risk and understanding different aspects of risk. Next. And there are new and emerging models like the director and the risk frameworks. I have to say that I'm a founding member of the Digital Directors Network, which is not affiliated with Divine. Systemic risk is the threat that component failure in a complex system will cascade and jeopardize the much larger risk areas. So newer models for risk look at regulation, data, architecture, risk communications in the event of a risk event, emerging technology, cybersecurity, third-party risk, supply chain risk, operations of IT. And we look at the cross-jurisdictional nature across places and organizations. Can systems be replaced? What are their interconnectedness, size, scale, scope, and complexity? Next. NAS's methodology for adversary obstruction, which is all about understanding risk and then obstructing the adversary from you to generate a plan to respond and ensure it is fully implemented without exceptions. So, hence, a national risk management plan. Next. Identify, assess, prioritize, mitigate, and monitor not only sector-specific risk, agency-specific risk, and having a risk mitigation plan, but also crossover sector risk assessments where risk can cascade through interconnected systems. Look at risk from an asset level to significant risk nationally to sector risk and crossover. Next, please. Threat catalogs. What are your threats? I put this in as example for you, external and external. Your adversary base is common to all of you. Nation states, cyber criminals, cyber terrorists, hacktivists, and insiders. They all have motives. They all have targets. They can all impact you. And they all have threat vectors. And what is a threat vector? That's how they attack you. The threat vector is how they come in, how they attack you. Now, I could read every box in this. It'd take a lot of time. We could have an entirely different discussion about threat catalogs. I just wanted to put this in there. You can read it in the downloads. But think of when you're doing a risk assessment, who are your adversaries? What are their motives, their targets? How can they impact you? And what are their vectors? How do they implement their threats? Next, please.
It's not working. There we go.
Boom. So thinking more specifically about cyber threats, directions, vectors, and types. Cyber threats come from, we just looked at those, hostile nations, terrorist groups, corporate spies, organized crime, disgruntled, et cetera. Your attack vectors are compromised credentials, weak credentials, malicious insiders, poor encryption, misconfiguration, phishing and ransomware, vulnerabilities that aren't patched, brute force, denial of service, SQL injections. If you're in the cyber side of your world, I'm sure you're well familiar with this. And the threat types, okay, the types of threats, how and what they attack, they use malware, spyware, phishing, et cetera. These are the things you need to assess your information systems for and determine if there's high risk or low risk. And I will still say today that 90%, or I shouldn't say maybe it's not 90%, 85 to 90% of most successful hacks today are through compromised or weak credentials and phishing, social manipulation and phishing. It's usually not an esoteric attack that gets you. So when we think about the elements of your risk assessments, the National Risk Management Plan calls for identifying your risk items, the impacts, and the likelihood. If you want to make that a little bit more robust, think of risk items, impact, likelihood, the specific vulnerability identification, where that threat will come and attack, and speed of onset. And most importantly today and to me, is understanding speed of onset. And what does that really mean? Speed of onset is how fast it can hit you, how fast it can spread. Once someone, a malactor, is inside your infrastructure, how fast can they spread across your network? How fast across all of your assets? How fast can they connect to who's connected to you in another agency, in another sector, in another business, in another supply chain member? And conversely, if you have a supply chain member who is attacked, how fast and what connectivities can they mitigate, how can they route from your supply chain members or your outsourcers to you and your core assets? That's why today, in today's cybersecurity world, speed of onset is important. And very specifically, there was a question about AI and cybersecurity and protecting. And I will say this, another bold statement on my side. There's nothing esoteric that artificial intelligence in cyber attacks is doing to you. It's the same stuff. It's the same threats. It's the same threat surfaces that are being attacked. What's changed with AI is the speed of the attack. The speed of the attack. Okay. So risk mapping, you can do risk maps on plotting. You could do color coding, et cetera. You could do numbers and putting numerical values 1 to 10, et cetera. But whatever you do, however the methodology you've adopted in your agencies, I would ask that you include impact, likelihood, vulnerability, and speed of onset as part of your assessment. Okay, next. So if you want to calculate it, the way we calculate it in the commercial business world is always about expected cyber loss as a financial risk. It's the sum of the risks times the probability. Now, data breach, ransomware, email corruption, weak credentials, misappropriation of funds and assets, denial of service, whatever it may be, take the sum of that and you can get a financial number behind that. What is the impact? We go to the next one. You can expand upon how you look at that and calculate it by inherent cyber risk, as well as how you're adjusted for cyber hygiene. Next click, please.
Yep.
So
We do have a question real quick.
go ahead.
From Stacy. Are you going to address what is expected of the SRMAs as a result of NSM-22?
Yes.
Fantastic.
Well, it's a very simple statement. They're expected to have a risk assessment plan for your agency or the critical sectors or the crossover impacts in your risk assessment plan. So if you're in the agency, every agency should be doing a risk assessment plan. That will roll up to the agency that's in charge of pulling it together for the critical infrastructure sectors. And then they will roll all of those up into one larger risk assessment plan for the critical sector. Okay. So inherent cyber risk, again, is what are the business impacts, ways of looking concretely at it is revenue at risk, intellectual property, fines, fees, response costs, recovery costs, litigation costs, and revenue recovery. Those are the aspects that go into understanding what the full impact of a risk event may be. Okay. The threat context is where is it coming from? What is the attack group, their activities, their patterns, their attacks, et cetera. You can mitigate that business impact times threat context. Then you can multiply that out against cyber hygiene, which you can add a factor on mitigating that risk based on what your cyber security maturity may be based on cyber controls for NIST, SOC, ISO 27001, or et cetera. Okay.
Yep. And Stacy says, understood. As someone who works for a subsector of an energy sector, my main concern is that DOE look at all of the subsector risk and not just their own internal risk. I agree with that, right? And I don't mean internal agency IT cyber risk. Hang on one second. I'll tell you what. Let's get through this part, and we'll pop Stacy open, and we can dive down in exactly what she wants to talk about. How about that? Is that good? Did you freeze? Hey, Joe's frozen. We're gonna do that. I promise Joe's gonna figure out that he's locked up. And welcome to what happens on Zoom. Here he comes. He's coming back. I knew he would be. There
I'm
he
out in the wilderness, guys, on a satellite link, so forgive me for that.
Yeah.
Stacy, what I would just started to say is, could you give me a little bit more context?
We're gonna pop her open in just a minute, and
Okay.
just let's get through this because we're just about done, and I want to make sure we get right
Certainly.
into what Stacy wants.
Okay, so following through for other tools that are out there, CISA does have a cybersecurity evaluation tool that's available to any of you to download, install, either run it online or download to your desktop. Next slide, please. It actually focuses more on assessing your practices, your frameworks, and your maturity models. It does not. I actually have it on my laptop. I've run some exercises with it. It doesn't do financial calculations of expected financial loss, but it does get into the cybersecurity maturity models. Okay. Risk, it's really all about the internet and your data. I've been stunned throughout my career about the ignorance we've had in strategic planning in the very beginnings of the internet. And yes, there's a yin, there's a yang to it. There's tremendous benefits with the internet and the World Wide Web, but there's also enables tremendous risk. Next slide, please. And the law of unintended consequences is very specific to the internet and the World Wide Web. It enables the low cost or the lowest cost, okay, for hacktivists, vigilantism, organized cybercrime, and warfare. It's that simple. The next large conflicts around the world will not be initiated through armed conflict. They will be initiated through attacks against critical infrastructure and information assets and financial systems. And organized cybercrime is big business. And it's not going to go away until we make it more difficult for them to make money at a low cost. It's that
So
simple.
true. Hey, Stacy, you there?
I am. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear
Go
you.
ahead, Stacy.
We know
Yeah,
you're with
so-
DOE.
I do not work for Department of Energy.
Okay.
I work for the Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement within the Department of the Interior.
All right then.
Okay.
They are responsible for all things on the Outer Continental Shelf, all energy operations. And I have been kind of heavily involved for like the last year plus in various cybersecurity things, including the White House led Cyber Regulators Forum. I co-chair one of the task forces, and I just hosted a multi-agency tabletop exercise
Oh, excellent.
about cybersecurity, largely focused towards operational technology, ICS systems on the Outer Continental Shelf.
Okay.
And, I've, and DOE, I've been a little bit of a thorn in their side. And I've been, really pushing hard that when, with the requirements of this NSM-22, with DOE having to take a look at their sector, that they make sure that they are addressing the risks posed by the various other energy subsectors. I've been assured that they are going to, but this is more than just internal risk. We have an IT department that focuses internally to our bureau. My office focuses very specifically externally to the sector that we regulate, and that's offshore. So that's the only reason I'm bringing all this stuff up. I don't mean to get us off track, but just want to make sure that my solid understanding, having read the NSM-22, is that it's more than just what DOE and the SRMAs have going on internal and identifying their own risk, but they have to be looking more broadly at their subsectors as well.
So I agree in your reading with NSM-22. And even if the NSM-22 didn't exist, I would agree with you. Okay.
Yep.
At the larger side, at the macro view, or the larger view, the macro view, more exclusive, somebody's pulling together across multiple sectors. And then under that, every little component or area whether it's an agency or it's a commercial business in a sector or their supply chain members, et cetera, everybody should be cascading up their risk assessment plans and mitigation plans.
Right.
And the identification of their vulnerabilities and their risks. So they should be rolling it up the chain from the lowest level or fourth level supply chain member all the way up the chain to a company, to a regulatory body, and then up to your SMRAs, so that it becomes all-inclusive for a cohesive view of where the risk lies and what can be done about it. And when it's done right, and I'm going to say when it's done right, I don't want to be so absolutist. Let me say, if we do a better job at this, of rolling it up, the patterns of risk become readily apparent.
Mhm.
So if you've got, let's say you got 40 specific entities involved in an area rolling up their risks, and maybe for you for offshore energy, look at everything that you touch, and everybody rolls their stuff up to you. You could look at the patterns of the highest risks, the highest rated risks, which you're looking for, obviously, and you already know this, is the high probability, high impact
High
risk, et
consequence.
cetera, so on and
Yep.
so forth. If you look at that, that pattern should emerge.
Mhm.
And if you see that pattern emerge, that's where you get a voice to say, hey, this is where we should be mitigating, and everybody should be mitigating in the same way.
Yep.
Right? And
Absolutely.
then if you're rolling that up with that type of background and data to support what you're doing, okay, up to the SMRAs, then it becomes a larger view of those patterns. And then back to the question that somebody asked about, 13686 and so on and so forth. It's about prioritizing where your funding goes to mitigate those risks and strengthen the infrastructure, the cybersecurity infrastructure for us, for all of us, right?
So
That's the way I
Stacey,
think about this thing. And everything you just said to me about what you're doing, I applaud that you're doing that. That is fantastic to hear. Okay.
Thank you.
what are you running into that you need help with?
Well, we are actually, I will tell you that the White House Office of the National Cyber Director is actually very supportive of the kind of steps that we are taking as a bureau. The one thing that that we are talking about a lot across the board is our organization really has we're the regulator, right? We have to make sure that operators on the Outer Continental Shelf are staying in compliance with our regs. However, we have no legal authority as it relates to cybersecurity. Congress gave that legal authority to the United States Coast Guard via the Maritime Transportation Security Act, which is why they were a very key player in the tabletop that I hosted at the end of April. So we are currently working through this concept of, and this is also with the White House, the Cyber Regulators Forum, this concept of regulatory harmonization to make sure that that we're doing our jobs as the regulator within our regulatory capacity, but also addressing risks. And what I will say, and I apologize to everyone here that I'm sort of, I don't mean to monopolize anything.
No, go ahead.
I'm just very passionate about this. What I would tell you about risk on the Outer Continental Shelf, it's absolutely not created equal, right? Because there are some 1,400 facilities in the Gulf of Mexico region alone, and some of them are old enough that they have no connectivity whatsoever. And there are other, some of the operators have the time, money, and resources, and they are well vested, and they have a strong cybersecurity posture. I'm more worried about those that are kind of in the middle that may not have, the financial wherewithal to invest the way they should. So my bureau, I actually have folks currently working on risk profiling to address just what you were saying, Joe, kind of, low probability, high consequence versus high probability, high consequence, and everything in between. So I wouldn't say necessarily true obstacles, maybe just some challenges that we are working very diligently to address.
Well, you are awesome.
I again, I applaud your efforts, and anything I could ever do to help you, feel free to reach out to me at any point in time. It's fine. I think in the deck, my personal email will be there. Anybody who's here today can always reach out to me independently on an email directly to me. I keep a wide dialogue going with everybody I worked with throughout my career. What amazes me is at times the way we work in the United States, okay? Government, commercial enterprises, okay? It costs money to put risk mitigations in place. The threats are so large today that we have to upgrade, or the weakest link is what's always going to get us, right?
Every time.
Every time. So the commercial economy is disincented on the commercial side to invest, because all the money you take from your commercial operations to invest in implementing more cyber controls or more robust security infrastructures, et cetera, for information protection, blah, 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 it comes away from profits.
Yes, it does.
Okay. Right. And self-interest is not evident out there, which is why the regulatory side paying real attention to these things and understanding the risks, putting the data behind it that can't be argued with to say, hey, here it is. Okay. I used to go through this just inside commercial enterprises, large multinational, 20, 30 billion euro companies or dollar companies in my career, running up risk assessments, et cetera. And everyone would complain, well, nobody does anything with it. They're not going to invest anyway. And I would say garbage. Document it, put it up, make it very, very visible so that nobody can argue with it. The risk is there. Then it becomes a discussion point through the regulatory bodies with the most senior leadership of the companies that you're trying to regulate in your sector, and make it very visible to them that that's where their weaknesses are. Okay, so they cannot hide behind them. And then you can't fix all ills that you want to mitigate. But this is why the risk assessment approach on a national basis is so important, to be able to say, hey, these are the ones we should pay attention to. Not trying to solve, all sins for all people, but get to the right ones. And do the best job we can. And it all comes through visibility and awareness. Visibility and awareness. I preach this to every one of my clients. Make risk visible. And that's what you're doing.
For great stuff, Stacy. Don't go anywhere. I do want to make sure we get out of here on time, because that would be the best briefing ever for somebody, I remember. So we're going to ask if you'd like to continue the conversation, how to protect your agency, if you want to find out how you can meet the NSM-22 initiatives, or want to discuss something else, pop it in here. It'll get to Joe. It'll get to the folks at Divine, and we'll make sure you get that. Carlos had a comment early on when you were scaring everybody to death. I've always heard the U.S. was on the lead of cyber awareness and proficiency, but the more I hear now, the above sounds more like propaganda. Is the U.S. behind that comparatively? I think, aren't we all in the same boat pretty much?
I think we're all in the same boat. So on the flip side, I'm not gonna hide behind in saying that we in the United States are the white knights. Okay. We're involved, our intelligence communities are actively involved in information intelligence and seeking out and protecting us as best that they can. So everybody's playing the same game. The key is, what are their motives and what do they intend to do? So when we look at nation state actors against us in the United States and what we're faced with, it's all about other nation states gaining some value. Okay. Now, are we doing that? Are we taking other territories? Are we attacking other people? No. Are we watching? Are we trying to embed protections as best that we can? Sure. I would say that pretty much everybody out there, all around the world, in governments, in nation states, in businesses, et cetera, we're all pretty much in the same boat. Okay. But I will tell you, I've been in this business for over 50 years, guys. I'm an ex-submarine sailor, all right? I remember when I was a nuclear security officer, that it was really pretty simple, okay? I had moats, I had fences, I had a pier, and I had 2 hatches to guard. All right. And we didn't have the internet and connecting all our information systems together. Right.
That's
I have to tell you, the stuff that we're facing, the proliferation and the speed for low cost attacks. You know what? It's not a doomist. It's a reality. I'm trying to be a realist about what's out there. I can get on the deep web today and in 15 minutes acquire an entire suite of tools for $150 to launch a denial of service attack against any company in the world today.
There's no doubt about it. Real quick, recap email will come out by the end of the day, early tomorrow at the latest. I want to say thanks for joining us. Here's Joe's information. You can get to Matt as well. We'll make sure we get your information out there too. Billy had a question. Stacy has to leave. Thank you, Stacy. I'm sorry we didn't get back to you quite as quickly.
No worries.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us. Billy says, I appreciate the presentation data. It was a couple minutes late. That's for you, Billy. I was for medical and mental health records issues. Do you have any information you would like to spread about being able to protect mental health records and issues like that? I think that follows a lot of stuff.
So all PII, it's the same thing we're trying to protect. So is there anything unique to it? It's the same protections that we have to go through, except making sure that you're paying attention. Are you protecting PII? Are you protecting medical information, et cetera? You know, I did not address that specifically here just because it just isn't enough time. But again, my contact information is there. Feel free to reach out to me separately or through Matt. We'd be happy to get into a deeper discussion. It costs nothing just to have a dialogue, a professional dialogue among us, and we could expound a little bit more deeply on the medical information side.
Fantastic. And John saying, how do we incorporate exercises into increase awareness and preparedness?
Say that again, please.
How do we incorporate exercises to increase awareness and preparedness? Great question.
So those are organizational change information programs, making them visible. So there's a communication aspect to this. Getting people involved on how to deal with risk and risk events is a follow through on having a risk assessment. Then you have a risk strategy. And then, as Stacy mentioned, doing tabletop exercises with the key players within your agencies or your sectors. There's a number of things that you can do to increase awareness.
That's great. I think Stacy laid it out exactly right. She had it. I was really impressed with what Stacy was doing. Very good. We're going to get you guys out of here. We appreciate you joining us and appreciate you sticking around for a minute or two to answer those last questions. Anybody got any last minute things? You can reach out to Matt and he will make sure he gets that to Joe. And I'm going to shut down this poll in 4, 3, 2, 1, and boom. So for everybody that responded on that, you will get a message from Matt, and we'll get you cooking.
Cool, excellent. Thank you, everyone, for being here today.
Thank you, everyone.
Awesome, great stuff.